Man, that intro has really picked up over the last couple of years. It's amazing. Well, hey, Sam, thanks a lot for joining me this morning. How you doing?
Hey, Jack. I'm great. Nice to be here with you.
You're in the States, unusually.
I'm back in the States. I'm in the Skip office right now, which is in Long Island City, New York.
Nice. One thing that I noticed being over in Europe recently is how good the food is. I feel like here in the States, it's a lot more questionable on the quality.
So I live in Germany, which means I wouldn't know. Food is mediocre at best.
It's very boring, but there's a certain beauty and simplicity to potatoes and sausage and mustard that really scratches an itch for me sometimes.
Good.
Well, Sam, thanks a lot for joining us today. So yeah, I guess like we've got a number of things that we can chat about, but one thing I've never heard you talk about on a podcast is sort of like why you got into crypto. Like, how did you become one of us weird Cosmos pirates?
Yeah. So my story starts back in New York when I was living here. So I lived in New York for about 10 years. And when I moved to New York, I just got out of college. I was doing biomedical research and basically like genomics research here in the city. And moved to the East Village, and this was right as Occupy Wall Street was happening.
Oh yeah.
That really kind of colored my experience living in New York. I was very new to
Zuccotti Park was like right there, right?
Yeah, I mean, it was it's in the financial district, so it was maybe like a 20-30 minute walk from me. But even if you weren't in Zuccotti, there was just kind of something in the air. So it was the topic of conversation. I had a lot of artist friends living here, and many of them were creating work about financial crisis and kind of institutional failure. So it was something that really affected me and my thinking at the time. But yeah, I was working at this in this research lab for a while, and in the meantime, I was encountering a lot of people here who were either doing activism or creating kind of political artworks, and my kind of like side hustle or like passion is working with artists. Both my parents are artists, so I kind of grew up in an artist household, and it's been a part of my life for a long time. And that, there's just this kind of like salon culture that I got kind of mixed up in. Just was very enriching, and weirdly enough, that took me into a number of projects that would ultimately become like early crypto ICOs, I guess.
Yeah.
There's this really strange moment in 2016 where in the art world there was this kind of genre of speculative design that or speculative fiction that had become popular, and at the same time you're seeing like this crypto boom, whereas like white papers and people just kind of like people just basically doing their own speculation and kind of creating something out of nothing. So for someone who is kind of familiar, like that's kind of the job of the artist, right? Is like to kind of weave a narrative and create some kind of imaginary. So a bunch of the people I knew were like, okay, I know how to do this. This is what I do, all the time. And so there was this moment where it felt like, fiction could kind of cross over and become reality.
Money is a meme.
Totally.
Yeah.
And no one understands that better than artists. So that was just like an exciting moment. And there, because of this kind of milieu of post-Occupy Wall Street, a lot of these like artists and activists were really frustrated with institutional failure. So it was like, okay, well, maybe we can actually do something here. So that kind of like new institutions, that like motivation to create new institutions was like very much part of my entry into crypto and what got me excited about it. And so I was kind of doing that for a couple of years while I was working in the lab. And eventually I was just kind of working 2 jobs at the same time. During the day I was
That's how it happens.
Doing this research, and then nights and weekends I was working on some on white papers and like just bouncing ideas off of different friends that were starting new projects, and eventually just kind of got sucked into it. I was offered a job in Berlin with one of the projects that I was working for, and I used that as an opportunity to kind of make a break from my research and actually jump into the industry full time. So that was like 4 or 5 years ago now.
Interesting. So you talked a little bit about the salon culture, and this is something that I've definitely experienced being in Cosmos too. There's a lot of folks in crypto generally, and I feel like Cosmos maybe is overweight in this or underweight. I don't really have a good way to judge that, but I think us and Ethereum have this community strongly. Mm-hmm. And it's interesting to see because some folks kind of went and did more NFT related stuff. And then there's other folks like yourself and Billy, and I think there's a number of other folks too that we could mention who have dug more in on the technical side. It's been cool to work with you for a lot of years and sort of see you grow in that area. What's drawn you to the more like mechanical, technical side of this with that sort of artistic background?
Yeah. It's a good question. I mean, Billy and I both kind of dabbled in NFT stuff as well. And we have a side project, which is like a NFT gallery called Folia, which is...
Oh, you work on that with Billy? Yep. Shout out Folia.
Yeah. It's a small but well-regarded Ethereum NFT gallery. But yeah, I mean, most of our time is spent on low-level infrastructure, and I don't know. I guess to answer that question, it's also like I'd have to speak a little bit about my taste in art, which is very much about like social sculpture and kind of relational aesthetics and things that actually touch infrastructure in some ways. So I don't know. I think that there's actually some beauty in kind of viewing that infrastructural layer as a part of the artwork.
I mean, I think it pretty clearly is, and I think that perspective is something that I have always loved about Cosmos. You get into these Web 2 circles, and they are so very heavily engineering and analytical. I think a lot of people forget how much of it is art, and that, especially when we're inventing these new abstractions and we're thinking of new ways to do things, you can talk about it in the transactions per second and the, IOPS and all these disk metrics. and you can lose the beauty and the essence of what you're doing and why you're doing it so quickly. And I think that this is something that's always like kept pulling me back in and pulling me deeper into Cosmos is the community has this really deep appreciation of the art of what we do. And yeah, it's just cool.
Yeah, completely agree. There was something about, well, the second half of my story is basically, I was living in Berlin and doing freelance work, and eventually the pandemic started, and I didn't want to be doing freelance during the pandemic, and Billy kind of pulled me into Cosmos at that point. So I'd done a little bit of work on a few Cosmos projects, but I really got immersed in it at that point. But the thing that was like really most attractive to me was it just being this like truly bottom up. You could kind of see it as this like self-assembling system, and that was very familiar to me. Someone who had kind of worked in biosciences, and yeah, and just aesthetically, like really appealed to me, I guess. There was this real sense of like emergence and world building that that Cosmos offered that I found very fascinating.
I mean, it really harkens back to Occupy Wall Street, something which I experienced in a slightly different way. I was living in Richmond, Virginia at the time, and I was a chef. And right across the street from the hotel that I worked at was Occupy Richmond. And I used to go and hang out, and, you know, Richmond being the South, it was probably more right libertarian than left libertarian, like you would have seen in New York. But yeah, a very similar vibe. And I think that, you know, Cosmos really embodies that ethos in a lot of ways still, which is cool.
Yeah, I've had actually this time that I've come back to New York, I had a number of conversations about why we're here. These are like bear market conversations. Like,
Totally.
what are we doing here? And
we only do conversations with Jack during bear markets. So
it's a bear market show. But I think that the reason's going to be different for everyone. But I think it's important to kind of get some perspective. And the reason I joined is still the reason I'm here. I think that this kind of opportunity to create better institutions is really powerful and exciting, and it's going to take a long time to roll that out. So it doesn't really feel like it's touching people right now, but yeah, just some of these things that we're building are like the prototypes for, I think, things that will ultimately be like foundational pieces of like civilization. So
I think that is a great time to shift to talking about Timeweave and your work there. I think, the Atom 2.0 white paper had a lot of authors listed on it, but I think what people may not know is that Sam basically wrote that thing. You babied it, you found so much feedback from so many folks, and really built a document that I think embodied the thinking of a lot of the folks who were close to core development at that time. And I think what we've seen since then is this roadmap of building more accountable councils that help govern the community, which is basically how every large human organization works, endowing them with some monetary power, and then using some really clever mechanism designed to bind together an economic zone this blueprint has now been taken by Optimism and Polygon 2 and a bunch of other folks, and they are now using it as their roadmap.
Yeah.
And I think it's, you were just talking about building those institutions and the mechanism design. I feel like TimeWeave is at the base of that exploration for you, and like is the right place for you to kind of dig in there. So tell me a little bit more about kind of what you guys have planned and what you're working on there.
Totally. Yeah, this project definitely came out of the this kind of amorphous working group that assembled for Atom 2. I met a bunch of people who ended up being the co-authors on that paper, like through that process, which was really fun. And yeah, it was a great vibe. And there's just a lot of ideas that I think we built conviction around that we wanted to continue to pursue. And some of that is kind of making its way into my work at Skip, and some of it's making its way into work at TimeWave. And the way that I kind of think about this is like a lot of the things around MEV are this like very small time scale, like high frequency flows, and TimeWave's kind of focused on like low frequency flows, so like long time scale collaborations. And one of the things that we're kind of starting with is a set of contracts for liquidity sharing agreements. We had kind of like a three-word mantra, I guess, for TimeWave, and that was in response to kind of what we were seeing in Cosmos, or what we felt like Cosmos needed, which was, and yeah, those three words were, long-term collaboration, or long-term permissionless collaboration. And yeah, I guess kind of pointing back to that self-assembly model, like I don't think Cosmos yet has the tools to like create these like higher order aggregates. Interchain security and mesh security, I think, are like kind of in this initial category, but these are very they're very technical solutions, and they don't necessarily kind of sit at the level of the kind of economic flows of different applications and chains. So we wanted a way for chains to create like trade agreements with each other and like cooperative units. And the Atom economic zone is you could think of as one of these, but there could be more. There will be more. I think that's what's going to kind of take the ecosystem to the next level, is the ability to better collaborate and create economic efficiencies and share resources and share user bases and things like this. So
what's an example of a liquidity sharing agreement?
Yeah. So there's a few that were kind of outlined in the consumer chain proposals, actually. For instance, in Stride's proposal to become a consumer chain, they asked for a certain amount of Atom from the Cosmos Hub community pool. And what they wanted to do with that was not take the Atom for themselves, but actually to transform that into an Atom ST Atom LP position, and have that held by the hub. So they want the hub to provide liquidity to be an LP in the Atom ST Atom pool. And that was a kind of condition for them to become a consumer chain. So, and this is really the main thesis of Atom 2 is like, I mean, I have kind of like said this a number of times, but like, I was never like a huge fan of interchain security, to be honest. I mean, you can attest to that. It like wasn't really my baby.
Yeah, I know, and you and I both share a lot of the same concerns about it.
Yeah, that was kind of like a Jaquan Sunny idea initially.
Yeah,
I think that there's merit to it, but it's like not a great business. So the idea here is like, okay, well, how do we? It can maybe be a piece of like a larger business. So, in my opinion, the business that the hub should go after is actually sovereign lending, like liquidity as a service, basically. There's a lot of demand for Atom. The Cosmos needs collateral, so
badly.
there's just an incredible, there's an incredible demand for this in the ecosystem, and there's no way to service that demand. So this is what this Stride ask is. It's like, can you please give us liquidity, and in return, we'll become a consumer chain. That's really what they. I think there's other benefits to becoming a consumer chain, but if you can kind of pair interchain security with liquidity provision, now that becomes a much more enticing offering.
That's like it's not just this like disconnected agreement between one community and the other. You provide security and I'm going to give you these unspecified flows. It's more of a full featured covenant between two different groups to help align incentives. And like, this is the key missing part of interchain security in a lot of ways. It was good to see Stride push that.
Totally. So in our opinion, like interchain security should be in service of liquidity as a service effectively. Like, so where we want to go with this is, so to make this like the business of the hub, the way that you would do that is you create a market for liquidity. So you can, basically chains can rent liquidity and they pay the hub for the privilege of having liquidity. And the idea with, and so if you're part of the Atom economic zone, if you're an interchain secured chain or an application within that domain, you would be eligible for a discount on that rented liquidity. So that makes it more attractive, more capital efficient to build there. But either way, I don't think that the hub should be excluding other chains or applications from deploying Atom liquidity. Like just the opposite. I think that the hub should try to be partnering with anyone it can. It should be trying to deploy Atom as widely as possible. But for those kind of within this zone, there's a little extra incentive. That there's a discount that you're eligible for.
Cool. So you guys have a proposal up on Neutron, right?
Yes. So you'll remember this well. We tried to deploy CosmWasm on the hub. The reason that we wanted to do that initially was so that Lido could deploy there. In order for this whole liquidity as a service thing to work, you need collateral that can be transported efficiently across the interchain. So you need liquid staking. And so Stride and Lido are great partners there. So we wanted strong liquid staking partners to be in and around the hub. But yeah, Prop 69 failed. And so the kind of next option was to try to deploy a smart contract chain within interchain security that could be used by Lido and other entities that want to build there. So yeah, and then basically a lot of the feedback that we got during Atom 2 was this is all really complicated. We want Hub to be minimal. So, we don't want this on Hub. And so, I'm kind of doing my best to like listen to the community and what they want. And so we are deploying this on Neutron. And it's also just been like a pleasure to work with.
They're fantastic.
Admiral and the P2P team, and really admire just the quality of that team. So we want to be long-term aligned with them, build with them, and make Neutron, a DeFi center within Cosmos.
Because Cosmos has become so many smaller orgs for a large variety of reasons, it's been, for me, very refreshing to work with some larger organizations in crypto. There is so much organizational knowledge and capability that gets lost when all of the orgs are under 20 folks.
Yeah.
And, the ability to, as a business, work with somebody more professional is hugely just refreshing.
Yeah, I agree more. Very well organized team. I think they kind of have their priorities straight. They know how to collaborate. So yeah, it's just been really nice to work with them. The proposal is not doing great right now. That's largely because it's like there's a single whale who voted it down. Kind of chatted with them this morning, so we'll see how it goes. But regardless, I guess the objective of TimeWave is to be one of the best collaborators in Cosmos. So we want to, we'll be working with Neutron in some way or another, and we also want to help like glue together Cosmos a little bit better and make sure that incentives are better aligned between different projects.
I mean, it's really key. I think that's one thing that folks don't really understand is how out of whack the incentives are for developers in these different projects within this ecosystem. It is, as somebody who deals with it at a granular level the way you do, incredibly painful, and it makes the type of collaboration that we need to succeed hard, because these teams, are incentivized not to collaborate, essentially. And they're incentivized into this kind of PvP thing. And holding that center and trying to continue to collaborate just gets harder and harder. And the easiest way to make that better is aligning incentives more. So you're doing great work here.
Yeah, one way that I've kind of described this project is Ethereum has this like unifying force, which is ETH. Like everybody's an ETH bag holder and everybody's incentivized to pump ETH bags. And that is an incredibly powerful substrate to build on. And if you look at layer twos, they're not, in my opinion, they don't scale Ethereum, they scale ETH. And Cosmos just isn't built that way. Even if Atom becomes like a reserve, like it's not going to be the center of Cosmos. And like the whole point is that Cosmos doesn't have a center. So the unifying force of Cosmos is IBC. And that is not like IBC alone is not going to make people wealthy, and it doesn't really it's not a collaborative force, a sufficient collaborative force. So we need something else. We need some other way to kind of bind projects together, and that's really what we're trying to do with TimeWaves. Create incentive alignment through token swaps and liquidity sharing agreements, and kind of interconnected trade. And I think there's a lot of opportunities, a very large design space to create more kind of higher order cooperation.
So moving from this higher order cooperation, like time waves, like long-term payments, down to nanoseconds and microseconds, and sort of emergent collaboration in the MEV space, I was stoked to see you join Skip. Love Barry and Mag, and you on that team is fantastic. You guys are working on a lot of stuff at Skip. What's most exciting for you these days?
Yeah, Skip is a blast. I've had so much fun working here. And so we have a couple of things in the market right now. And it's a little bit like, it might be a little bit challenging for people to kind of understand what Skip does, but I would also say Skip's trying to do some kind of like, glue together the ecosystem. MEV in a way is
we got to grow this pie. I've got it in my profile. We're growing pies. The big pies.
Yeah, we're a pie shop. So MEV is also kind of in a way, it's something that like works around and between different projects. So it's kind of like the art and science of off-chain actors, and how different chains interact with them. So one way is through the kind of construction and coordination of their block space. So that's why we have this block space solution. And then the other is kind of how transactions are constructed and passed around. So we basically work with chains to kind of make their block space more efficient and better for users. And we're now working with wallets to make sure that their users have the best experience. And it has a similar kind of flavor to it. That's kind of why I was attracted to both of these projects. Is there's kind of this like unifying invisible force that's kind of essential to both. And some of the stuff that we have going on at Skip, we're really trying to make the IBC network easier to use and simpler. So we released an API recently that does kind of IBC path solving and DEX aggregation. And the main idea is like, how we got here is 6 months ago, we had a team retreat, and we did this exercise, and I highly recommend this for like any team. We gave everybody on the team $50 of Ethereum.
Ooh.
And we said, okay, everybody gets an application in Cosmos. Go try to use that application. So you get Terra, and you get Akash, and you get Uni, and you get Osmosis. I mean, it was a team of 10 engineers or so at the time, very talented. And I think 2 or 3 of them were actually able to use the application. Just the bridging experience from Ethereum and then between different Cosmos applications was absolutely horrendous. And it was just really eye-opening. Like, if we're going to be some kind of cross-chain MEV company, and if Cosmos is supposed to be the kind of like home of interoperability, like we are completely failing here. Like you can't get from A to B. So we just saw a real need there, and that really gave us the conviction to build this API product to just make it a lot easier for applications to actually use the IBC network. It's not that IBC is not functional. It's just that it's really complicated, and there's so much complexity exposed to the user, and a ton of foot guns.
I mean, it's meant to be abstracted. It's not meant to be exposed to the user. And, I think that like a lot of the things that people say to me is like, why is it so hard and all of this stuff? I'm like, well, if you want to support scale, you have to build in some of these abstractions that are like tough for users, and you abstract those away. And, we only get funding and we only work on basically the developer user experience. So the users that I build for are not the users that are going and doing that. They're the users like Skip that's going and building the APIs that enable users to do that. And it's, the massive step up in IBC usability that you guys and the TFM folks have kind of led over the last few months is taking a lot of that fundamental work that's happened over the last few years and bringing that up into the UI. And, this is a long history in Cosmos of kind of underfunding of the UI and an overfunding potentially of a lot of the dev work, the dev adoption work. It's very interesting. One thing that, just to tack on, if you've got some comments on that, you can say those.
No, go ahead.
Okay, one thing just to tack on about the Skip and the growing the pie thing that I've always found challenging for Skip's business model is that in Ethereum, it's a homogeneous environment. There's one giant hose where all of the MEV comes out on mainnet Ethereum, and it's one thing. In Cosmos, because we're sort of inherently this application-specific blockchain thing that's spread over a ton of chains, there's a lot, like, even though the entire pie is like obviously proportionally smaller, it's fragmented across a number of different state machines. And I think what's been fascinating to me about watching the Skip journey is each of those state machines have very different ideas on what the right way to handle MEV is. And this leads to this really highly varied environment. Do you want to talk a little bit about that?
Yeah, absolutely. I do think that Ethereum is going to kind of head in this direction eventually. They just don't quite know it yet. But yeah, we discovered very early on that there were pretty widely differing opinions about how the transaction supply chain should work, how inclusion and ordering should work in the chain, and we kind of baked that into our product offering. So try not to be overly opinionated about how all this should work. Instead, we provide more of a framework where chains can kind of pick off of a menu and figure out what they need for their chain. So one of the things that we've been working on is on the block space side is this lane structure. So basically a chain can say, oh, okay, I want to organize my block space and divide it up in a specific way. And at the very top of the block, maybe I want to auction that, because typically an auction is going to kind of yield the it's just going to have the highest yield for inclusion there. But after that, maybe I want to make it so that there's an Oracle transaction in every single block, because that's important for whatever application I'm running on my chain. And then I want to make it so that after that, there's a kind of priority lane for NFT holders that are like that have used the application above a certain threshold, and I want to give them like discounted transactions. So there's like all kinds of ways that you could imagine building a system that really works for your application, and yeah, we kind of see our job as helping different applications do that, rather than telling them how to do it.
Yeah, I love the way that the Skip team works and the pivot that you guys have made to focus more on usability and growing the pie it's the only thing to do right now. You know, it's,
and you are
you got to
seeing
bring in users.
a lot of this stuff like making its way back into Ethereum too. So the whole Pepsi idea was kind of Atom 2 inspired, and I've been chatting a bunch with Barnaby.
Oh, somebody just mentioned that I should reach out to him. Can you intro me?
Yeah.
Random. I just ran into Barnaby's Pepsi thing yesterday. I've been reading up on that. It's a cool concept, and like, yeah, it's very similar to stuff that you worked on.
He's also just a really lovely person, and so we just have enjoyed speaking with one another.
Cool. Nice. Awesome. Well, yeah, I think that this is a good place to kind of to call it. Is there anything that you'd like to chat about before we wrap?
No, I don't think so. I guess I'm just very flattered that you'd asked me on for the first conversations with Jack. And
well, thank you. I appreciate it. You know, Sam, you're somebody who's made a lot of contributions to this community. Most of them have been behind the scenes. And, you know, frankly, like, I wasn't always the nicest to you, especially when you first came in. And seeing you, it's true. And, you know, I can't can't deny that. Seeing you take that feedback that I gave you, improve your work, and sort of continually try to push this community forward with your efforts, that's something that we can and should celebrate. And there are many people within this community who do work behind the scenes quietly, but, you know, yours especially, I think, should be highlighted. And the ideas that you championed, often things that I didn't necessarily agree with on Atom 2, have seen huge adoption throughout the ecosystem. And those are things that originated with you in a lot of ways. And you need to get some recognition for that. So thanks a lot for coming on. I really appreciate it, Sam.
Thanks so much, Jack. Thanks for having me.
Absolutely.
All right.
We have a quick comment to check out. Oh, we have a quick comment to check out.
Okay.
Which comment? Oh, we've had some issues with chain halt since the chain halt governance. This might have impacted the vote with Time Wave. Okay. Well, we're going to get this vote with Time Wave fixed, and we'll work with some folks to make sure that this gets pushed forward, because it's an important initiative. Thank you, Solitude Studio. Awesome. All right, Sisla, let's wrap this one out. Thanks a lot, everybody. I'll see you guys next Thursday. If you've got any suggestions for who I should have on, just drop them to me on Twitter. Everyone have a great day.
Bye.